Welcome to another episode of Find Your Free, the podcast. I am your hostess, Rachel Voss, and we're just going to jump right into it. So, on the past episodes of the podcast, or some of the past episodes, I talk about when I record, right? So, when I first started this podcast, and this is episode 13, so just 13 episodes in, but with the first maybe 2 episodes, I recorded on Friday afternoons. It just seemed like a good time, get it out the way before the weekend starts. And then one Friday, it couldn't happen for whatever reason, scheduling, whatever. So then I did it on a Sunday. And I liked the way it felt, doing it on a Sunday afternoon. So I started recording on Sundays, and that kind of became the recording day for me in the house, right? Like, okay, Rachel's recording on Sundays. So yesterday, today's Monday, first day of March. Hey, March. And so yesterday, I couldn't get it together. I couldn't get it together. Like, we woke up in the morning and, we do we check in with our, couples counseling. We do that twice a month. And so we do that on Sunday mornings, and it's fairly early sessions. So we got up, we did our session, had a good session, laid in the bed, talked a little bit, went back for a second sleep. So that's when you wake up and you do some things, maybe, look at the phone, do whatever, and then you get back in the bed and go back to sleep. So second sleep, right? Or maybe you never get out the bed. But anyway, you wake up and you go back to sleep and have a second sleep, and then you get up and start your day. So I had my second sleep. And then I got up, but what I did was get up from the bed, make something to eat, checked on my son. Everybody just kind of seemed like they were just like, yeah, I'm here today. And went downstairs and just immediately after making something to eat, plopped on the couch, I just don't got it today, And it's been a while since I have felt that tired. When David listens to this, he'll laugh because he's like, dude, you're tired every day. And I am to some extent, in that if you know Ayurveda a little bit, I am Vata Pitta. So Pitta's fiery, Vata's airy. Vata is is the energy behind creativity. Pitta is the energy behind, getting shit done. And I am sort of split down the middle between the two. There's also Kapha, which is a third, sort of constitution, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, but we're not going to turn this into an Ayurveda episode. That'll be down the line. So we all have all three of those constitutions within us. It's just that some are more dominant than others. And with me, Vata, Pitta is dominant, and Vata might edge out Pitta just a little bit. And so between the two, I tend to burn energy really, really quickly. So again, if you do know just a pinch about Ayurveda, Vata, again, as the energy of air, moves around a lot, and so people who have or who are dominant Vata, they'll be types, they walk fast, they talk fast, they move fast. And I'm just like that. Some by way of being from northern New Jersey, that New York City metro area. It's just a fast moving place. But some of it is just naturally me. And so, I'm thinking all the time, I'm moving fast, I talk fast, I'm doing a lot. And so in that way, and then Pitta being fiery energy, when you're using Pitta as well, between the two, you can burn your energy kind of quickly. So Vatas might tend to tire out a lot. Even Pittas might tend to tire out a lot because they're just constantly in their energy and then, kind of burning it out. And so I say all that to say that at least at one point during every day, I have to sit down for 20 minutes to an hour, whether it's just sitting down mindfully, whether it's laying down and taking a 45-minute nap. Maybe it's just catching up, with one of my favorite shows, just, pausing for an hour. I have to do that at least once a day, especially on the days where I teach yoga classes in the evenings, when I teach my 7 o'clock classes, because then at that point my day's going to 8 or 8:30. And, I get up anywhere between, 6:30 and 8, depending on the day and whatnot. And so, the days that are longer for me, I definitely have those, I got to pause in the middle of the day moments. And me being a person who is of service, my work is based in giving to others. My design is based in giving to others. I just, I'm a service oriented person, right? And so I give a lot. And that combined with, that Vata Pitta energy, like, and a little bit of Jersey girl thrown in, right? That New York metro area energy thrown in, like between all of that, I definitely can burn out, have my burnout moments during the day. But I say all of that to say that yesterday, Sunday, I couldn't get it together. And so David comes down about like 3. He's like, dude, you potting today? And I'm like, do I have to? He's like, well, because he helps me do like all the back end editing and stuff like that. So, I have to be conscious of how I move because, he has to be able to do what he needs to do. And so I'm like, do I have to? And he's like, well, I mean, you could do it first thing in the morning. You could do it, tomorrow evening after I get off work because the podcast studio is also his work from home office. And so he's like, but are you really going to feel like getting up extra early? Are you going to feel like at the end of the day potting? And I'm like, let me just lay here for like another hour and see how I feel. And of course that turned to 2 hours. So I'm like, you know what? We're just going to call it a wash for today and I'll get up in the morning. So I'm actually recording this podcast on the first day of March in Monday morning, nice and early. And this is good energy. I'm actually glad that I waited until today because yesterday I think the conversation would have felt forced. I was kind of like still unsure about what I was going to talk about. Although this morning I woke up still kind of like, where am I going to go? And I've been throwing this idea around in my head all week about talking about choosing joy. And that was still sitting, with me this morning talking about choosing joy. But then something else happened last night that kind of, it's something like I kind of feel like I want to get into as well, but it's about putting yourself first. So then as I was like showering before I came down to record, I do that to kind of clear the channels. I know we all get our best ideas and thoughts and downloads in the shower. So I was like, well, maybe it'll be a conversation on choosing joy and putting yourself first, right? Like that's the beauty, of this work is that can shape it, however I want it to look. And hopefully it is received by you, the listener. But so what happened last night is, let me scale back super quick. So when everything first happened last year with the pandemic and quarantine, and it was like, all right, those first 2 weeks extended into a month, and then the month extended into summertime. And it was like, oh no, this is real. And I'm not seeing my family and I'm not hugging parents. Like this is happening. So when the pandemic got underway in 2000 last year, 2020, when the pandemic got underway and it was like, all right, like, it's going to be a minute before we're able to like gather as a family, I sent out, so we have our family text group, and I sent out a text and I said, it was like one Sunday morning. I just woke up like, let's do a Zoom family dinner, right? I was like, we used to back in the day, like way, way back in the day before everybody moved on with life and, had kids and all that stuff. We used to gather at mommy's house, for the for the classic Sunday family dinner. Forgive me, y'all. I feel good. I'm glad I waited till Monday morning, but it is still a little early. So my brain might be a little foggy. But yeah, we had this tradition of like Sunday family dinners. And then once we all got into our lives and my mom moved from the house I grew up in New Jersey to New York, like just, life happens and traditions shift. And so, Sunday family dinner just became, Thanksgiving, Christmas, when the family could gather. And so one Sunday last year, I, just like sent out a text to the family group, like, hey, let's do a Zoom Sunday family dinner. Like, let's check in. Let's do like what we used to do. Right. And, oh yeah, let's do that. So I was like, all right, I'll set it up. We'll do it tonight, 7:30. So we did it that one Sunday. And then it was like, all right, let's meet next Sunday. Okay, cool. And then after some time, it was like, oh, this is becoming a thing every Sunday. Like when I threw the idea out there, it wasn't for it to be like every Sunday for the rest of our lives. It was just like, hey, let's just check in. Like, let's just do it this one particular Sunday. And then, when it was like, oh, well, let's meet again next Sunday. It was like, okay, the excitement's there. But I thought eventually like it might kind of die off or it become like a monthly thing or something like that. But it started to become this very regular thing. And so probably maybe like 2 months in, there was like a Sunday, right? And so there was like a Sunday where I was just like, I just don't feel like it. And it wasn't that I didn't feel like seeing my family or anything like that. But again, this new world that we're living in, like I teach on Zoom, my part-time job is like everything is on Zoom and computers, and you're screaming at the screen and talking to the screen and, hi, can you hear me? And take me off of mute and, all of that, right? So I do that Monday through Saturday between teaching part-time and everything else in between, right? Everything has to be virtual now. And so this one particular Sunday, I was just like, it's not that I don't want to see my family. It's that I don't feel like screaming at the screen. Like I just, not that I have to scream in Zoom, but the talking to the screen, I was just like, I'm having a day and I just kind of want to just ride my day out. You know what I mean? Like, so if we were having dinner in person, it might be like the first Sunday where I'm like, hey family, I will check you next week, like feeling a little out of it today or whatever, So when I realized like it was this every week thing at this point, I was like, hey family, so listen, how do we feel about maybe moving this to every other week, as opposed to every week? Because what happened was for me, when I felt like, oh man, I don't know if I'll make the call tonight, I felt this like hint of like obligation, like, oh, I'm going to have to do this tonight. So I was like, well, let me offer it. If I feel it, maybe somebody else is kind of like, yeah, let's do this every other week. So I put that idea out into the group text, and you would have thought I asked everybody to sacrifice their first child. No, if we do this, we're going to break tradition. My family's very much about tradition. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. So I said, all right, my bad. Listen, was just making a suggestion. All good. And my one brother says, well, listen, I kind of just thought it was a standing thing at this point, and whoever can join joins and whoever can't doesn't, we'll see them when we see them. So I'm like, all right, cool. As long as that understanding is out there. Again, I am super family oriented. I love my family. I live and breathe my family, but I am also a Scorpio, as I say in just about every episode. And I definitely have my moments where I am just like, I just want to be left alone. Like, I just want to be in my space. And it's not against anybody. It's not like I'm moody. I just retreat that way. Like I need to just go and have time by myself to retreat, to reflect, to just be by myself for whatever reason. If nothing else, just being by myself, like that's just the Scorpio way, at least this Scorpio's way, where I'm just like, I just need some time. And sometimes that feeling conflicts with the family call, right? There's some Sundays where I've got dinner going kind of early and, we're just laid up and, just being lazy. And it's just kind of like, I just want to ride the lazy out. And yeah, it may seem like, it's just getting on Zoom and not doing much, but you got to be present. You got to be engaged. And sometimes you just don't feel like making the effort of logging into Zoom. It's like, I just want to be lazy. So bringing it all back to last night. So last night, yesterday I'm getting up and I'm just kind of feeling like, man, I am just out of it. And so probably around like 6, I'm getting up to try and, figure out something to put together, for dinner. And I'm thinking about the call, and I love my family. I'm going to keep saying that. But it felt like I started to get that feeling of like, and I used to be in corporate and I'm like, I just don't feel like going to work today. Like, there were days when I would get up and be like, oh, I don't want to go to work. And then you kind of pull it together and you're fine. But there were some days where it was just like, no, I don't have it in me. And I'm calling out today. Like, I need a mental health day. So it wasn't like I needed a mental health break from my family, but it was more just like, I need a mental health break, period. Like I felt that. And I was like, all right, let me just tell my family. I hadn't recorded the podcast, obviously. So I was just like, let me kind of just tell my family, hey, I need to tap out tonight. I still need to record, whatever. Just going to tap out. We'll see you guys next week. Thinking, again, we show up when we show up. We don't show up when we can't show up or whatever. And throughout this year, it's now been a year almost of us doing these calls. Not everybody is on the call every time, right? And so I say, hey, I need to record, so we won't be joining. I kind of just speak for the family, me, David, and my kid, right? Because I'm like, well, if I'm not up to it, I just noticed how everybody was moving yesterday. So I was like, I'll just kind of get us out of the call tonight, right? And just give us give us all a mental health break. Again, not from the family, but just in general. And it felt kind of selfish just to try and get myself out, So So I sent the text to the family and, and get a response back. Well, what if we start later? What if we do this? And it was just kind of like, no, I can't. I'll see you guys next week. And then, so I have all brothers, as I mentioned all the time, all older brothers at that. And they are definitely the type to jab each other, jokes, all that good stuff, right? So I definitely have the same brother, and he knows who he is. The same brother who said, yeah, we just come in. It's just a standing thing and you join when you can join. The same brother threw a little, okay, but it was just like a little meme with like a, yeah, okay. And, and again, brothers jab, that's what they do. But I am sensitive Sally Scorpio. So I'm like, well, fine. Like, just as long as whoever else doesn't join the dinner next time, they better get the same side eye. Like, I was in my shit, right? And my one poor niece, she's like, okay. And she just sends like a hug emoji to the group, like, okay, I see where Aunt Rachel is today. But it made me feel something in my body that kind of made me feel like almost like not anxiety, but just like that tightening in your body where you're just feeling like I just kind of want to do what I want to do. Like, why am I having to explain myself? And I was talking to David about it, and David was just like, well, Rachel, you might be being a little bit overly sensitive. Like, maybe you just kind of need to let it go. You know how your brothers are. He's like, but at the same time, I have seen that sometimes you catch a little more heat than everybody else. And it's just the nature of things, right? So I'm the one who shows up for like everything, or like when the world was moving around, like I would drive up from Maryland, I would make sure I was here, I would make sure I was there, So when you position yourself as the one who's always going to be there, whether or not people realize it, an expectation is set that you will always be there, right? And so there's the people who never show up, or they show up every once in a while, and they become like you know how they do. They'll show up every once in a while, but then there's the expectation for the people who always show up. And I have defined that in my life. And so I just think sometimes it's just like, you should be there. Like, how are you not there? And it kind of felt like that a little bit last night. And so it felt like I had to, it didn't just stop at like, hey, I'll see you guys next week, and I host the calls, right? I signed up to host the call. So every once in a while when I can't join, if there's scheduling conflict or whatever, I'll ask the same niece who sent out the hug emoji. Like I'll ask her, can she host? So me hosting, I have to say, hey, family, I'm not showing up tonight. Can somebody else do the call? So, so I always have to like broach it, and say, hey, and then I feel like I have to end up explaining myself. And, again, as David says, that's probably a little bit of response and probably a little bit of like choice in terms of like, well, you choose to explain yourself. Like, just say, yo, I won't be there this week. I'll see y'all next week. But the thing is, I feel like I can't say that either. Like, I feel like there has to be an explanation. So ultimately, I didn't join the call. David did, you know what I mean? And he told them, like, listen, she's just feeling really sluggish and out of it today. She does need to record her podcast. Oh, tell her to record earlier next time, And it was just like, but I'm here. And so he ended up like, going in for the team. And I appreciate that, babe. Thank you. But that sat with me, right? So I am saying all this to say that, and coming back to what I was thinking about in terms of what I wanted this conversation to be in terms of choosing joy and stuff like that, I was thinking how when I decided to sit out of the family call, in a way, I was choosing joy. I was choosing what was best for myself in that moment. I know how I felt, like I got up to make dinner and I was just like, I'm out of it. I just need to kind of like sit. I just didn't want to get on the call and look like I didn't want to be there. So I just was like, I really need to just like tap out. Clearly this is a day that I need to rest, so let me just ride the rest out. And I felt like I was choosing what was best for myself. But then all of a sudden that flipped and bounced into like guilt. Like, and I asked David, like, am I wrong because I didn't want to do the call? I feel like I'm wrong, because I just felt like tapping out this one night. Like, am I wrong? I believe in family. You hear family over everything and all that kind of stuff. So then it's like, well, maybe I should feel bad or guilty because I didn't feel like doing the call this one night, right? And so David was like, babe, like, what was the point of tapping out of the call if like all you were going to do was beat up on yourself about it? Like, you're not even enjoying the time that you took off of the call for. You know, you're not even like enjoying the time, like you're fretting about it. So you might as well just join the call. And that is kind of the vibe I went to bed with, right? So that's why I say when I woke up this morning, like I still thought about talking about choosing joy and just what that looks like in our lives. But I couldn't help but to think about tying choosing joy with doing what's best for you, because sometimes they're aligned. Sometimes choosing what's best for you leads to joy, you know what I mean? Or again, sometimes joy is choosing what's best for yourself. And so just getting into that, you know, I am also in this rites of passage program, and I've talked about that a little bit here and there. And it's a rites of passage program for women, 9-month program. And without getting too deep, because it is a sacred space, but the overall goal is us as women kind of looking back on our little girl selves, right? And honoring the needs of the little girl that got lost in the shuffle of life and getting older and, you know, getting all into the grown up things and really getting away from childlike joy and childlike dreams and childlike needs and stuff like that, and sort of connecting our triggers or our ways or our lack of giving ourselves permission, right? Like some of those things can be or are directly linked to the neglect of the inner child, right? The not honoring the needs of the child, or physically, you know, being a child and not having permission to speak up, not having permission to say, you know, no, I don't feel well today, or, you know, just whatever it is. And when those things happen to us as children, they can become, you know, patterns and ways of being as adults. And so this rites of passage program really kind of looks at all of that in the way of giving ourselves permission just to be these beautiful women, you know, walking in our purpose, walking in authority. And it was just something that I was looking for a long time. You know, I know they have rites of passage for, you know, young men and certain cultures. It's like, you know, when boys turn 12 or 13, they're taken away from their family for an amount of time to, you know, be put into the world and see how they survive and, you know, all that type of stuff. But I was looking for something like that for women, because I have always felt like I'm getting to where I'm getting. You know, I've found my free. I'm still finding my free. But, you know, as we continue to do the work, right? Because healing is a constant evolution, right? We don't, you know, we heal certain things, but then life keeps happening. So we're always in a state of healing. So it's like a continuum. And so there was just this part of me, you know, as I continue on my continuum, that felt like, yeah, there's something that needs to heal. There's something that still feels like it's missing inside of me. Like, and then I would feel like, I wish they had a woman's rites of passage. And then ultimately, you know, I was led to one. And so my personal work, so we do like our group calls twice a month on Sundays. Okay, so it's like, you know, on those Sundays when I don't have that, I have a family call. And then every once in a while, I'm like, I just want my Sunday night to myself. Like, hello. But we do those calls on Sundays, and they're beautiful calls. And then we do one-on-one calls with the sister who's leading the rites of passage. And so I have had 3 one-on-ones at this point, and it always comes back to like, what are you doing for yourself that is joyful, right? So the first call was like, what does joy look like? And I'm like, oh, you know, binge watching Netflix and, you know, just everybody leaving me alone. So the second call, it was like, have you done something joyful? And I think I did like, oh, yeah, I built my altar. Okay, that's great. But like, joy, you know what I mean? Like, and then the third call, with my most recent call, was like, oh no, I did this ritual and it just made me so happy. And I let this candle burn for like 5 days straight. And it was so exciting watching the flame. She's like, yeah, so I feel you finding peace, but that's a little bit different than joy. Like, I know those moments might make you happy. I know they might make you feel joyful, but like, what gives you pure, unadulterated joy? Oh, being with my mate, you know, doing whatever my kid, not attached to them. What brings you joy? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. And that's the coaching work and the one-on-one work. Like you got to keep digging, you know what I mean? Like a good coach, healer, spiritual guide, what have you, like they will see what you're choosing not to see or what you can't see or what you've been blocked to see, like in yourself, right? So it's like you keep digging, like keep getting beneath the surface, keep getting beneath the surface, keep getting beneath the surface. And so it's like I was like, I don't, I'm this upbeat person, I'm happy go lucky, like I just feel like I am joy. But then I was like, well, what if that's like, what if I'm like deceiving myself in a way, right? Like, because the truth is, like, yeah, I am this happy, upbeat person. Like, I'm just people who've known me my whole life, or who've known me for like a year, a couple months. Like, I would definitely bet my little bit of life savings that I have that if I lined 10 people up who knew me from different times of my life and didn't know each other, they probably all say the same thing. Like, oh yeah, Rachel's like totally upbeat person, because I am, and I'm grateful for that. But as a human, I have those moments where I retreat, again, being that Scorpio self. And sometimes that retreat is beating myself up, being hard on myself, just feeling like I'm not good enough, just like it can get a little murky in my mind. And that's some of my other work with the Rites of Passage program. It's like, let's get your mind to like a nice, clear, cool, calm place so it can receive what it needs to receive. It can receive that creative energy, but there's just a lot going on in my mind, constantly just hard on myself, constantly feeling like I need to meet expectations, calling out of a family Zoom call and then running it over in my mind for 3 hours after because I feel guilty or I feel bad or why won't they let me be me? You know what I mean? So it's like, I may put on sometimes this like joyful exterior, but on the inside, it's not there. It's not aligned. Like the inside looks different. And it was really interesting because in that session, we pull like cards and to get a message, and she pulled a 3-card spread. And the first one was like, yeah, you're in the space of like creativity and fertility. If you listen to the second episode, I received that message of fertility, but you're in this space and da-da-da-da. But then, so that's kind of like, it was the first card represented like the situation, right? Like, this is what it is. And the second card kind of represented like what is happening in the present though, right? So anybody who knows cards or is at least a little bit familiar, like the middle card is sort of the link between the first card and the last card, the first card and the third card. So the first card is kind of like, this is what it is right now. The third card is usually, this is what it can be, will be. And the card in the middle is kind of like, this is what you need to know to connect that first one with the third one. So whether it's manifesting something, letting go, something, whatever it is, the middle card is usually the link. So the first card is like this fertility. Third card was success. And obviously I got the third card after the second, but to present it for this discussion, it'll make it really interesting to see. So it's like what we talked about is like, yeah, just free your mind, get into this creative zone. You're in this creative space. And yeah, like you are going to have success. So try to put down like the worry of like the how and just do the work, right? But the middle card was pessimism. And I was like, oh shit. And the card itself was like a woman in a box, and the box was like black and white, and it just looked, sad and, and all of that. But I was like, that's how the fuck I feel in my mind sometimes. Like, I feel like I am just this woman in this box. And whether it's boxing myself in with worry, whether it's boxing myself in with other people's expectations, like I feel like I'm in this box sometimes, like mentally in this box, like I feel trapped. And, and so she said to me, like, this is the one, like, this is what we have to work on, and this is what I mean when I say choose joy. Like, yeah, you're going to have rough days, rough moments, like we all have that. But just in terms of your everyday life and walking in your purpose and walking in your authority and walking in who you are as a queen without explanation or anything like that, like getting your mind to that place of joy, And it was like, when somebody tells you something and you get it, but you don't get it. So it was like, I get it. But what I didn't get was like, well, what does joy look like for me then? Because it's not like she told me everything I thought was joy was wrong. I think it was just, not even I think, I know. It was just more about though, like, okay, you're creating this altar to grow your spiritual path and all that. And that's beautiful and that's wonderful. And these are the things that we want to do, but it's still connected with like spiritual growth. And yeah, spiritual growth gives you joy, but like, what about like running around in the field with like no shoes on, or walking around your house naked, or, dancing? And she didn't say these things, but these are just things that I think of when I think of joy. I just think of just being free and frolicking and, and it's like, I'm just happy to be here. And I didn't know what that looked like for me. And I really sat with the idea of like, maybe I always thought I was this joyful person because I generally have like an upbeat demeanor, but like what's going on the inside, right? Because the inside is where all the stuff is, right? The inside is where we house our life experiences, where we house those things that create our trauma triggers, where we house just our life experiences. And those are the things, again, just kind of going back to that point I made earlier when we think about our childlike self, like things that even started then, things we saw then, things we were exposed to then, things that we didn't have permission for then, as a child, like those things stay with us and ultimately shape our minds and how we look at things. And you have from childhood on to whatever age you are now, and your body has absorbed all of that. Your mind has absorbed all of that, whether we realize it or not. Your mind is just like a filter, and every moment of every day we're seeing something, we're taking in something, we're hearing something, and whether you realize it or not, your mind is kind of like, okay, boom, keep this. Okay, boom, let that go. Okay, boom, we're going to hold on to this for later. Like it's constantly filtering. And the things that make the deepest impressions on us and the things that tend to shape us and sort of make us who we are the things that get deeply embedded, in the subconscious. And so I'm just saying all that to say that like it's in my subconscious that I feel like I have a lot of stuff going on that perhaps I'm not aware of, or that I have stuffed down and just didn't want to deal with, right? And so there is this like, okay, yeah, I'm upbeat. And then there's like, yeah, I'm the yoga teacher who talks about finding your free, right? So it's like, I've done the work, I've gone inside. But this past year, just really growing as a spiritual guide, growing as an entrepreneur, having to really up the game, moving virtual, all that stuff. These past 2 years of trying to, bring another life into this world all of it has required self-reflection and going in. And I've talked about how, I've gotten readings over the years, like Akashic and just intuitive and, whatever else is out there. And, different readers, different backgrounds, but I usually get the same thing. There's something in you that still needs to be healed. And that is kind of like the linchpin for things, right? And then you have my one-on-one session with my rites of passage coach. And she's like, because I'm like, okay, how do I honor the needs of the little girl while also being the big girl who has a business she has to maintain? Like I have to think about those things. I have to think about systems and processes and all of that. And none of that is joyful to me. Like I just want to do the work. And, and she said to me, I dare to say that the joy that you may still be seeking, or the joy that I'm encouraging you to find, like when you find that in your personal life, it's just going to be across the board. It's going to show up in your work. It's going to open up the channels, like things will happen. And I was like, that is so aligned with what I've been told before and multiple times, like I've been told, like, again, there's something in you that needs to heal. And when that thing heals, the doors will open. And so being told like, find more joy and the doors will open in a different kind of way. It's like, all right, like clearly there's something going on that is holding me back from my joy, and maybe it's not that deep, but there's still something that I need to find and tap into. And so when I tie it to that feeling I said I felt in my body when, it was kind of like, okay, Rach, we'll see you next week. When it was like, well, you can't pod later, or you can't join in later, or it was like I couldn't just be, right? And I felt like I had to explain myself, and that created like that tightness in my body. Probably it was anxiety, and I feel that sometimes with my mom. She has discovered these podcasts on Apple, and I'm so excited for her. So now she'll probably be listening more regularly. But I talked to her about that. Like sometimes, and in the episode I talked about with her last week, how sometimes I get a little anxiety around because of just wanting to, be pleasing or meet their expectations. Those are just general mother-daughter stuff, right? So I sometimes get that tight feeling. I said that to David last night too. I'm like, it's interesting. Like that tightness I sometimes can feel with my mom, like I feel that with my family. Like, and then that's when we got into the discussion of like, all right, well, what's them and what's me and what's kind of a little bit of both, right? But doing this work and studying what I've studied so far, I'm like, but that tension is a response that I need to pay attention to, whether it is I'm creating the tension because I made a decision and they weren't happy and oh well, and I keep moving on with my life. Like I could have felt that tension because I kept ruminating on their response instead of just letting it go. Like letting things go is not like an easy thing for me. I tend to think, and why can it be this way? So that could have been causing the tension, but I'm like, no, but the fact that my body responds this way tells me like this is probably something I've been navigating my whole life with these people. You know what I mean? Like, and I shared that a little bit too, just being the baby sister and the youngest and stuff like that, and being the only mixed child. Like, I think all of that has played into me sort of figuring out where I belong. Sometimes it's these moments like last night, and I've shared this in the podcast, where being the only mixed child, like amongst my mother's 4 kids, like sometimes every once in a while I've kind of felt like a little bit like I'm on an island by myself with that because nobody else has that experience. And I just think, my mom's 4 kids, each of us think differently, but I feel like there's a commonality with them, and I sometimes think different from that, if that makes sense, right? And, and sometimes that feeling still sits with me. Like, I just feel different sometimes. Like, why am I the only one that's willing to say, hey, I won't be able to be, at the call tonight? And then Dave was like, well, because everybody else just doesn't show up. They don't explain themselves. They just do what they do. And I'm like, but again, the thing is, if I feel like if I just don't show up, I can't do that. Like, I just feel like certain permissions are given to other people that are not given to me. And, again, that could just be baby sister. You do what you're told, you know what I mean? And so when I am choosing to do what I want as opposed to doing what I'm told, like that, can cause that tension, that friction. So whatever it is, I'm like, okay, well, I definitely will self-reflect and see like where I can let go, where I cannot take things so personal. Not taking things personally is definitely my lifelong lesson. But I also need to leave room for how my body responded, because I am working on my joy, and I need to know the things that make me feel like that, because absolutely when you feel like that, you're not feeling the joy, right? So I'm in that place of trying to figure all that out. But I will say, and I can share this a little bit from the rites of passage just because it's a spiritual practice overall, but in my spiritual growth, especially, it's March 1st, so we're just getting into 3 months in this new year. So especially really over just these past 2 or 3 months, over the past maybe 4 or 5 months, I've really been deepening some of my spiritual practices, some of what I am seeking out. I've just been getting a little bit deeper, and I've been learning about spiritual baths. And I would see them before, but didn't really know what they were. Like, you see a woman in a bath and she's got the flower petals and oils and and all that type of stuff. And I just thought it was like, oh man, that's just a really glamorous way to take a bath. But there is what's called a spirit bath or a spiritual bath. And it's putting maybe dried flower petals, maybe putting essential oils, like crystals, like really not just getting in the bath to wash yourself, but getting in the bath as ritual and making it a sacred space to clear yourself, to honor yourself, And so, spiritual bath in that way. And one of the practices that had been shared with me was like, okay, if you don't take a bath, like if you just don't have a bathtub, but you just have a shower, you there are, so you can take a bath and put the flowers, and then there is like a mix you can make, right? Of like coconut milk and the oils and flowers and just all these different things. And if you would either put that in your bath water, or if you don't have the bath, you pour it over your head in the shower. And so, my rites of passage coach, take your spiritual bath, take your spiritual bath. I have a friend, dear friend, Lori. Lori, if you're listening to this, shout out to you. I love you. Lori's been doing her spiritual baths and been saying, hey, Ray, did you take your spiritual bath? And I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So the thing is, we have a bathtub in our townhouse. We're currently renting. And so the bathtub, like, David made a funny face when we first moved into his house, like, I don't know if I'm in love with the bathtub, right? And so we just always take showers in it. But, and so I really wanted the experience of like sitting down in the bath, right? And I think that was a little bit why I kept avoiding it. Like, so finally this week, it was Wednesday. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm doing my spiritual bath. Like, I need to get it done. Like, I keep being told, I'm trying to figure things out. Like, I need to get it done. So Dave's like, all right, I'll tell you what, scrub out the tub for you, make it nice. I'm like, Dave, I know you got feelings about the bathtub, because it's just like not ours per se, you know what I mean? So he's just kind of funny about that. And so he's like, no, I'll scrub it out, we'll do whatever. So I'm like, all right. So he scrubs out the tub for me, and that Wednesday evening, usually my Wednesday evenings are like my one kind of quiet evening. So I'm like, I'm going to take my bath tonight, I'm going to eat my dinner. Dave has his like men's group meeting on Wednesdays. And so I'm like, all right, bet he'll be like in the basement. It'll be quiet. I can go up to the bedroom and just really kind of be left alone. And so there was a point, again, in my being tired, where I was like, I'll take the bath tomorrow. But I was like, no. He cleaned out the tub for me. Let me at least honor that, And so I went up, and again, we've never used the tub by way of a bath. So I had to figure out the stopper, right? And the stopper, in a nutshell, just didn't work. Like, I ran the water, I thought the stopper was working, and I realized like after like 15 minutes, the water was like not going past this one certain level. Like at first I kept saying, oh, it's just taking some time. But then I'm like, it's not moving past this level. So I got frustrated. While the water was running, I put my mix together. I put it in this little bowl and, mix it all together and say affirmations and all of that. And so I was like, well, I can't waste the mix. But I was like in my feelings that I couldn't take the actual bath, right? And so I kept trying to mess around with the stopper. I kept trying to fix it, kept trying to run the hot water, okay, as I'm trying to fix this. And then finally it was just like, fuck it, it's not going to happen. And I got in my feelings. And then I'm just like, nope, you know what? Let me just take the shower. I'm not going to waste this mix. Like, I can't waste the mix, because it's been sort of blessed, if you would. So let me just do the shower. So I turn on the shower, waiting for it to get nice and steamy. Never steams up. Why? Because when I was trying to figure out the stopper and I kept running the water thinking I was filling up the bathtub, I ran through the hot water. So the shower was lukewarm at best, and it's cold here in Maryland at this point. So I'm like, oh my God. I just, like, all I'm trying to do is do something small for myself. And it's like not happening. So I was like, well, fuck it. I'll just make the most of it. So I got in the shower, wash yourself up first, and then you sort of step out of the stream of the water and you pour the mix over yourself. So I took the mix and I dumped it. And like I said, it's coconut milk and all of this. And it was like a shock to my system. I literally was like, like it was like a shock, especially with the water not being like super hot. But then it just like opened up something. Like I literally felt something open. And I took this deep breath in and exhaled. And I was like, fuck, this is joy. Like it felt, and I just massaged the coconut milk into my body. And it just was like, that was the most joyful shower, I will say, probably the most sacred shower I've ever taken. And you know what I mean? Like, and I came out and I just felt just new, and I was like, this is joy. This is joy. And so I definitely plan on doing those spirit baths more, even though they have to be a spirit bath shower in the meantime. But that's joy, right? And so I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely going to have to make sure I make more time for this in my life. And so I'm just trying to figure out what more of that looks like. Sure, maybe I could take a spiritual bath every day, but it's like, when I tell students like, oh, if you're having a moment, stop, drop in yoga. But sometimes we're just not in a place where we can take that downward dog, right? Sometimes we're in a place where the yoga has to be, I'm just going to sit here and take a breath for like 10 seconds, and then keep it moving. So in that way, maybe I can't take a spiritual bath every day, right? So how do I find joy? How do I choose joy, right? And truthfully, y'all, like, I just took that spirit bath last week. It hasn't even been a week, and I had this little moment last night with my family, right? So I'm still figuring out what joy really looks like for me. And at this stage in my life, sure, when I was in my 20s and I was at college and, that was joy, right? I was going to clubs. I didn't care. I had nobody to think about but myself. I had my little job, so that's like, that was joy, or that was fun, or that was life. But at 43, it's different. It's just different. It's different. It's like what really feels good for me from the inside out. Not, yeah, fun night out with the girls, a night of dancing, all that stuff. Dancing brings me joy, but like that stuff that really nurtures you and anchors you and is that place that you can return to time and time and time again when when you need a little dose of joy, right? Like, what is that place inside of you? Where can you go? And every day I understand a little bit more what my rites of passage coach is saying to me. Like, what does that really look like for you? What is that place for you? Not connected to your kid, not connected to your mate, not connected to your family, but what is unapologetic joy for you? And being totally candid and from the heart, part of the joy that I will say that feels like missing, I think sits with the little girl I so desire to have. So I have to, do my work around that. But I'm still figuring that out, But I do know a little bit of what I learned more from the insight of not joining last night's Zoom call is that you do have to do what's best for you. And sometimes it might not feel joyful to have to choose yourself because it could mean you being the only one dipping out of a family Zoom call. And the decision might not be the most comfortable decision, but if it brings you joy, right, in the long run, like if you're making time for yourself, if you're establishing those boundaries, like that can bring you joy, right? Or maybe joy is just putting yourself first all the time and being, again, unapologetic about it, right? But yeah, so just thinking about what does that look like for me? I offer that to you. What does joy look like for you? What does choosing yourself look like for you? And not in the way of like not being compassionate. I mean, selfish can be like the ego. Ego definitely gets in the way of life, but ego also has a bad rap. The ego does serve a place in all of our lives. The ego is why I'm doing this podcast right now. The ego is why you're listening to it, right? The ego is the thing that actually drives us to be our better selves. It just gets a bad rap because then it does what it also has the other side of it of like being egotistical and, thinking you're better. And it's like when ego gets warped, but ego actually serves a place. And so, yeah. So where was I going with that? I got all into the lesson of the ego. So let me just bring it back because we're getting on this hour anyway. So let me just bring it back. Every once in a while, I'm like, this is why co-host is nice because they could be like, so Rachel, you were talking about A and now you're on B. What happened to A? So yeah. But choosing joy and putting yourself first. Oh, selfish. That's what I was saying. Selfish can be warped like the ego, and there can definitely be negative implications from being selfish in that way. But sometimes you have to choose yourself for self-preservation, and there is nothing wrong with that kind of selfish. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing wrong with that. So what does that look like for you in your life, right? How can you still choose joy? How can you choose yourself? Sometimes maybe joy is like, I got to tap out and just, I'm going to, catch up with my favorite Netflix show, or I'm going to curl up with a good book and my favorite cup of tea, or I'm going to, I don't know, pour the coconut milk over my head and, just whatever it is. Like, what does that really look like for you? I challenge you to think about that for yourself as well. Like, what is your joy? And do you do what's best for you, or do you do what's best for everybody else? And do you see alignment between doing for everybody else and not feeling full joy, or vice versa, right? So this is all part of the journey of finding your free loves. I've done a lot of work, been through a lot of therapy. I've had my ass kicked around, I've been in dark places, and I'm in right now the best place I've ever been in my life in terms of like awareness and stuff like that. But the journey still continues. It's every day. I'm learning, I'm growing, and in some ways, like I said, I have found my free. I liberated myself from my corporate job, but I'm still trying to find absolute freedom to be me, and I realized I was resting on my laurels a little bit, riding the coattails of quitting my job. Like, oh yeah, I quit my job. But it's like, nah, that was just the first step. Now you've got to break those internal chains. And I've broken a lot of them, but I'm still breaking them, right? And I think the more I break, the more I'll find my joy. So I am still here finding my free too, in that way. And, I just offer that to you, to think about joy, to think about how you're showing up for yourself, to think about if you are giving more to others than you're giving to yourself. Like, are you feeling burnt out all the time? You know what I mean? And what can you do to balance that, to sort of right the ship, if you would. So, well, lovelies, I think I'll leave it there for now. Certainly hope. I just, like I always end up saying, I just got on the mic and just kind of talked, and what came to me. Last week I knew I wanted to talk about my mom. Like I said, this week I was just kind of like playing around with the idea of joy, but getting up at 6:30 on a Monday, recording this podcast this early for the first time, it was just like, yeah, I'm definitely just gonna go with spirit, see what happens, So, but as always, I hope it is a message that resonates and that you can get a gem from, because that is the goal of these podcasts. Not just to talk and blab and vent, but to hopefully, share a lesson and a good word. And speaking of a good word, let's go ahead and begin to settle into a comfortable space as I get ready to read the passage for today's episode. So every episode I read a passage from one of my favorite books, or a book that has just really had some impact on me. Last week I shared the lyrics of my mom's song for me. So settling in, if you are in a chair, maybe resting your feet on the floor, your hands on your thighs, or maybe your belly or your heart. Tall spine. If you're sitting on the floor, on the couch, same thing. Just lengthen your spine, soften your shoulders. If you're lying down while listening to this, just shifting around and just allowing yourself to be totally comfortable, feeling a little more ease with each exhale. And then we'll take a deep breath in and release. And this passage that I'll share today is from Melody Beattie's Journey to the Heart, and it's called Cherish Joy. Choose joy, then cherish and savor it. Joy is not a fleeting emotion based on outward circumstances, a transitory feeling of the moment, a reaction to the scenery around you. It comes from within your heart like the waterfall that rushes out the side of a mountain. Joy is a runoff from the wellspring within you, and sometimes it is a delightful, surprising contrast to the scenery around you. Embrace joy. Relish it. Even if those around you don't have it right now, you can feel your joy. You don't have to be disrespectful of their feelings, nor do you have to let their lack of joy diminish yours. You have done your work. You have chosen to open your heart. Now you have your reward. Cherish joy. It's your treasure. You found it. You've earned it. It's yours. So I knew when I was looking up a passage, I was like, I definitely have to find one that talks about choosing joy. And I love this passage because it just pretty much sums up what I've said. It's in my 20s, joy was, clubbing and dancing and, having fun and just being 20, and 25 and all of that. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't joy, but there was some external joy, you know what I mean? Not so much internal, but the external of like being with friends and going out and all that type of stuff. Again, joyful moments, joyful memories. But now it's about tapping into the joy that comes from the wellspring within you, as the passage says, right? Not connecting that joy to external circumstances, not connecting that joy to like, oh, I'll be happy or I'll find joy when or if, or, it's like that place within you that it's always there. And maybe there are days like I had yesterday where you're not feeling so joyful, but when you're ready to tap into it, when you're ready to choose it, you know where to go, you know? So I love this passage because that sums all of that up. And again, that is what finding your free is about, loves. It's about finding what feels good to you, for you. It's finding those places and spaces in life that just feels like, man, I can be here. I want to ride this out. This work feels good. This relationship feels good. This whatever feels good to me and for me. And moving, when you make those choices, that's what allows you to move authentically. And the more authentically you can move, the more you are finding your free. And that's what this podcast is about. That's what my journey has been about. That is what my work is about. It's just encouraging others to choose and live their most authentic lives, because I just firmly believe that a society of free and happy and joyful people, especially women, okay, could make such a huge difference in this world and the way of things. So find your joy, choose your joy, cherish your joy, and don't apologize for it. All right, lovelies, let's go ahead and close this out as we always do, by my saying, may you be happy, may you be free, may you be peaceful, easeful, useful, and joyful. The light in me honors the light in each of you. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you next week.